Hey guys, this is TR. Today I'm going to focus on a quick massing study for anatomy. We're going to be using some AI art and look primarily at the torso and the hips. So to start, I usually just make a circle for the head. That's usually the best place to start because the head is kind of the reference size for the rest of the body. A figure will either be like 5 heads tall, 10 heads tall, whatever. So here I'm just putting in the jawline, putting some basic lines in, dropping the neck down pretty quick. Once you drop the neck down, it kind of gives you a center line, and that helps you find basically kind of the pivot point for the top of the figure. And I'll put the collarbones in sometimes because they angle down somewhat, and then that'll give me a little more indication of where the direction of the shoulders is going. So I'm just dropping down the arms really quick, just 1-2 lines. And it's the arm, I'm focusing right now on a torso and hip study, so the arms aren't as important. Drawing the torso, I usually just start with a circle again, just like the head. And I'll kind of try to find these basic exterior lines where the edges are. I'm just going to find a quick line for the hips, just basically showing you that we're kind of looking down at the hips, so that back line would be the top of the back of the hips. You can see kind of now how the torso and the hips are they look kind of like trapezoids, but just going in opposite directions, where the thinner part is in the middle where they meet. Again, this is an AI art reference, so it's pretty realistic, but obviously this woman's anatomy is very hyper, exaggerated. And this is pretty important right now. I'm finding the rib cage, and so see, I put that little horizontal line to find this kind of intersects with the center line, and that'll give me a little more close to the real shape of the rib cage. It's this kind of strange shape, and you have to kind of just draw it a few times to really get in your head. I'll do some little details here on about the ribs and the chest plate to show you more of how the rib cage is constructed. So I'm just finding those bottom ribs right now. Remember, we have 12 ribs. 2 of them though aren't connected to the cartilage that goes up to the sternum or the breastplate bone. But 10 of the ribs are connected, so they don't actually meet the bone. They're connected by cartilage. So I'll show you that in a second. But here we're going to just work on the hips a little bit more, get some more details in there, find the legs. So we're just ghosting in the back edges. Can't really, because of the clothing, you can't really see where the legs insert exactly, but that's okay. We're just kind of focusing on the massing and the shapes at this point. So you can see the horizontals of the hips all kind of line up. So it tends to be this one large mass that moves kind of like a block, or like I said earlier, a trapezoid. You can see the simplified trapezoid shape here. And again, when you're thinking about these shapes, don't think about them in terms of flat shapes. Like just because they say trapezoid, square, cube, whatever, think about it as this object is going into space. So you can see there's a little bit of perspective. So you might want to freshen up on some perspective videos, tutorials. I can do some of those in the future, but just always be thinking about these lines converging to a vanishing point. If that doesn't make any sense, don't worry. I'll do some videos on perspective to fill in those gaps. I'm basically just saying the shape is, think of it as a 3D shape on the paper, not a flat shape. Here I'm just, kind of putting some curves in to give a little bit more indication of that organic form. The human body is extremely difficult to illustrate because every line is a curve, basically. There's not really too many standard straight lines that or landmarks that you can use to make a realistic looking figure. So using a reference is always extremely helpful and I think necessary for almost all art. These pencils I'm using are Prismacolor blue pencils. You have to order them online. I think they're discontinuing them in the store, but they're called non-photo blue pencils, and they were originally used for animation work, because when you scan them in, they wouldn't show up. So I'm just going to define this ribcage shape a little more, just so you guys can see a little bit better. You can see right now I'm drawing in, actually that's actually the first rib which would occur on the rib cage, and so it's going kind of opposite direction of the collarbones. Just the navel with that center line. So where the rib cage meets the, it doesn't really meet the hips. In between is the external oblique muscle. That's what creates that crease right there. Also called the love handle, in more layman's terms. So let's just do a simple little rib cage diagram here. I'm just gonna again start with a circle, and this is basically those three lines. Circle, center line, and then you got where the ribs come up and make that little V shape. I'm just going to put the neck in at the top so you can kind of see the perspective. So we're looking down at it somewhat. But it's the best way to think about it is as a vase or a barrel. Not really a barrel, because it kind of tapers towards the top, towards the head, right? So it's just there's not really a shape to compare it to. You just have to kind of draw it a bunch of times. You'll see that piece in the middle I just drew, that's the sternum. So the ribs all connect, let's see, the first 6 ribs, I think, I might be wrong, the first 6 ribs connect to the sternum with their own cartilage, but the next 4 are somewhat connected by cartilage. And I'm gonna draw that in just a second. So you see we have 12 total. 2 are they're called floating ribs, but they're free floating, whatever you want to call them. They're not connected to the sternum, so they wrap around about 60% or so. One's a little less than around the body, and but they're just kind of floating, and I'm not really sure why. I guess it allows for that kind of movement and expansion over time. We just developed to not have those connected. So the other 10, though, they're connected by this cartilage, and it kind of creates a V shape. You see the little V I drew right here, and from the V into the sternum, so now I'm drawing the bone. This is the actual bone. This is the marrow, and then from that point into the sternum is the cartilage, and so the cartilage it basically allows for flexibility. So when you breathe in really deeply, your ribs can expand, etc. So there we go, there's the cartilage area. I'll just darken it in a little bit. So going back to the model, I'm just gonna darken the neck a little bit here and put these traps and trapezius in the back. Those are the big fan-like muscles. We'll do some back anatomy too later, but for this video again, just the massing, the torso and the hips. You can see I put a little bump there where the collarbone comes out. That's the deltoids and the collarbones all insert into that little bump that creates that. You can look in the mirror and see a little bump on your own body. And then here's the pectoral muscle and the deltoid. You see they kind of connect at the same point. Again, I'm getting kind of beyond the basic massing here, but just showing you some landmarks to think about, and just think about how these muscles kind of stretch around the body and allow for movement. Right now I'm dropping in these lines you've probably seen. This is actually called a sartorius, and it's this long, like tape-like muscle, and it kind of creates that edge that you see in a lot of drawings that in the figure where the light kind of hits kind of sharply at that edge. So again, that's called the sartorius. Latin or Greek? I'm not sure. From Sartor, Taylor. I guess that means... Oh. So it's from Sartor, which means tailor. And so it's producing the cross-legged position of a tailor at work. Also from sartus, past participle, which means past participle of sarcire, which means to mend. So interesting. So it's named after the actual profession that was sitting cross-legged while they're working at like a clothing tailor, I'm assuming. Again, I'm just drawing in some more details here. Putting the hand in there. I'm not going to do all the hand anatomy. I'm just going to put a shape in there so it kind of goes along with the figure. Dropping in the jaw muscle. And let's just put in some basic stuff for the hair, etc. Just so we can remember this is a female form. The male form is slightly different. The proportions are different. The center of gravity, the navel, bottom of the tailbone, everything's located a little bit different. Women have a lower center of gravity, and so they're able to actually pick up. There's some tricks you can see online where women can pick up chairs, and while putting, like, you lean your head against the wall and you can lift up objects, and men are unable to do it because they have a higher center of gravity, so they'll tip over. It's kind of funny. I'm just doing some quick rendering here, just basically kind of bored, filling in the sketch. And that pretty much wraps it up. I mean, there's a lot more in the body, obviously. There's hundreds of muscles and hundreds of bones. And so as an artist, you don't have to learn all of these. A doctor would probably have a better knowledge than most artists of human anatomy. But as an artist, it's good to just kind of look at these landmarks and just see how things fit together. Again, every figure is so much different than the next. Like, if you just look within your own family, there's probably a huge variation in terms of people's body shapes and body types, and that even changes more when you exercise or eat differently or don't eat enough, etc. And so you always should use a reference for the figure you're trying to go for, because it's so you can use your imagination to come up with these figures, but there is so much variation in the human form that it's best to find a model or a reference of a model or person that has the proportions that you're kind of going for, because there's so much variation, and this changes is based on cultural factors and how we are raised, whether we play a lot of sports when we're younger or etc. People just, or genetics. I mean, probably the main one, but there's just so much variation, and it makes it really interesting, and it makes it sometimes easy because you can get away with a lot of things. You can, no one's gonna dock you points if you have shoulders that are slightly too wide or muscular, etc. Let me just talk about this quick diagram on the left here. This is, when you think about the body, you can think about these three shapes connected by a spine or like a rope. And so the thing is that each of these three shapes, they can rotate in three directions. So you can lean forward. So if you're bending over to pick something up, you can lean forward, and you can lean back if you're leaning back to, stretch your arms behind your back, etc. You can also go side to side. So if you're leaning over to your right side and picking up, leaning onto your left side and picking something up, and you can also turn. So basically, you can rotate and then lean in any direction. And so because of this, with these three masses, you can create an infinite number of poses, an infinite number of directions. So you can have the torso turning to the left, hips turning to the right, head turning to the left. It can be, there can be a lot of variation. So you can see here I'm ghosting in where the torso can bend over. So basically you can lean over, it's one direction, lean back, lean sideways, turn sideways, turn, turn left, right, lean over from it. It's just so many options. Let's just draw on these lines a little bit heavier. And I can indicate these a little bit more. I can draw more of these arrows. It's probably gonna get a little messy because I didn't plan out this diagram. I was just kind of winging it with right here. But let's see, how am I gonna do this? Let's draw these arrows. Yeah, kind of spin around. So this is where you can turn left and right. See, there's the other direction you can go. Again, if I'm turning to the figure's left, kind of go around this way. Let's see, draw the arrow in, yeah, like that. And just fill this in a little darker so it shows that it's kind of in the back. Let's draw this front arrow in so it shows that you can lean forward. But you guys get the idea. I'll probably stop this in just a second, but the main thing is that you can lean forward, go side to side, turn and twist. But yeah, I mean, we'll do another video that kind of shows more of these poses in action instead of just as these basic blocks. But for now, I'd say, if you focus on these three main masses and get these correct, you'll be able to look at any picture of a person and kind of start to see those almost, I call them like X-ray forms. And so that'll give you that framework for constructing anatomy and understanding anatomy. And just a quick word on anatomy. I mean, you should always, you can get kind of lost. There's thousands of videos online. I'm just making another one of them, right? You can get kind of lost in the fact of, what am I learning this anatomy for at the end of the day? Like, do I want to create finished works, or do I want to just be able to name all the muscles and, run them off the top of my head? I mean, I don't, you should probably always be thinking about your end goal in terms of creating art. What are you doing this for? Because I see a lot of videos about sketching and drawing with a pencil, etc. But traditionally a pencil was used for layout work, and then the final work was a particular medium, whether it was oil on canvas, fresco on a ceiling, marble sculpture. There was a final work you had in mind. So keep that in mind. Like, what do you want to do for your final work? And then in the meantime, you can add to your studies, but we revere the artist Michelangelo far more than Da Vinci, even though Da Vinci spent inordinate amounts of time studying the figure and anatomy and things like that. So always realize you only have limited time, and so only spend so much time on what you call quote unquote studies, but remember the main goal that you have for what art you want to create.